Alright then, here we are once again inside the wonderful world of War Thunder, where today we'll be taking a little look at everyone's favourite German light tank, the Pz.Kpfw. In this video we'll be covering the C version. The Ausf F and H will be getting their own videos at some point, as well as the Ausf L, although that last one hasn't been added to War Thunder yet. But for today, it's the first classic Panzer II, the Ausf C. Now, as anyone who's seen one of these videos before will know, we'll be going over the history and technical details first. If, however, you simply cannot contain yourself and absolutely must see these tanks in action right this minute, then I've provided a handy little time code in the video description. As for the rest of us, let's put on our black uniforms that could easily be mistaken for, but most certainly are not, Waffen SS, load our Walther P-38s, and cram ourselves along with two other burly tankmen into the history of the Pz.Kpfw. To begin this story, we must of course start by going back to the origins of German tank development, which, as I'm sure you all know, started during the First World War. On the misty morning of the 15th of September 1916, near the villages of Flers and Slit, during the Battle of the Somme, German soldiers began to hear what sounded like engines coming towards them from the British lines. Surely those crazy Englanders can't expect to drive armoured cars across the muddy, cratered, barbed wire-infested landscape of no man's land. But then, out of the mist came several large, lumbering, rhomboid-shaped behemoths moving on tracks and spouting fire from their sponsons. This was the first combat deployment of the Allies' new secret weapon, the British Tank Mark I. Although too few tanks were deployed in this offensive to make any real difference, and of those that were deployed about 2/3 would break down over the course of the day, the sudden appearance of these armoured monsters that could seemingly advance relentlessly, regardless of mud, barbed wire, machine gun fire and the like, caused panic in the German army, from the trenches where the tanks were first encountered, all the way up to the German High Command. The German War Ministry immediately scrambled to find countermeasures to this threat, from developing armor-piercing bullets for the infantry's rifles, to developing new artillery doctrines placing medium field guns close to the front in order to fire directly at the advancing tanks, all the way up to developing a tank of their own. For this last project, the War Ministry formed a committee of engineering experts from various companies, led by Josef Vollmer, a renowned automobile designer. The team put forward two designs, the A7V and the Großkampfwagen, also known as the K-Wagen. However, by the time the team was ready to start producing a prototype, the German High Command had decided that the British tanks, along with the French Schneider armoured fighting things that had joined them, could be effectively countered using artillery, field guns deployed as anti-tank guns, and the new armour-piercing ammunition type, the K-Bullet, which could be fired from a standard Mauser Gewehr 98 rifle, and featured a hardened steel core allowing it to perforate around 12mm of armour at a range of 100 metres. Even as the Allies deployed the more heavily armoured Tank Mark IV, which was almost impervious to K-bullets, the Germans still found an effective counter with the newly developed Mauser M1918 Tank Gewehr, the world's first dedicated anti-tank weapon. Because of this, Germany's tank project was put way down on the War Ministry's list of priorities, and as a result, the project was significantly hampered by a lack of resources. Despite this, Vollmer's tank committee pushed forward with the designs for the A7V and the K-Wagen. Only two prototypes of the K-Wagen were built, both of which were still incomplete by the time the war ended. Although Germany managed to finish one of them, the Allies ordered that it be scrapped under the terms of the Treaty of Versailles. The vehicle took the concept of a land ship proposed by the British prior to their tank project and embraced it wholeheartedly, with the complete vehicle being as close to an actual terrestrial warship as tanks have ever got. It weighed 120 tons and was covered in 30mm of armour. It was armed with no less than 4 77mm guns and 7 MG-08 machine guns, powered by two 650 horsepower Daimler V6 engines and crewed by 27 men, distributed around the vehicle's 6 internal compartments. For rail transport, the K-Wagen could be broken down into these 6 sections. This incredible machine never left its factory and was scrapped there under the supervision of the Allies who, it seems, cared nothing of history. Ah well. Germany's other tank design, the A7V, also known as the Sturmpanzerwagen, or Armoured Assault Vehicle, was a little less ambitious than the K-Wagen, but was still massive compared to British and French designs. Like the early French tanks, the A7V was designed as an armoured box placed on top of a modified Holt tractor system, which Germany had purchased from Austria-Hungary. This chassis was also to be developed as an armoured personnel carrier and an unarmoured all-terrain cargo carrier. In the end, only the battle tank version was built. The first pre-production example of the A7V was completed in September 1917. It was a huge vehicle, weighing 33 tons, armed with a single 5.7 cm Maxim Nordenfeldt gun in the hull front, and 6 7.92mm MG08 machine guns, 2 in either side and 2 in the rear. The A7V was armed by 18 men, the commander, driver, 2 mechanics, one of which also acted as signaller, 12 infantrymen to operate the machine guns, and 2 artillerymen to use the main gun. This meant that the interior of the vehicle was very crowded, which was not helped by the fact that the uncompartmentalized engine was right in the middle, being very noisy, hot, and emitting exhaust fumes. The A7V was, however, armoured with up to 30mm on the hull front, which was very thick for the time. The armour wasn't hardened though, so while it would keep out rifle caliber bullets, larger shells could perforate the armour with ease. It was powered with 2 4-cylinder Daimler petrol engines, each delivering 100 horsepower for a total of 200. This gave the A7V a top speed of around 9 miles per hour, or 15 kilometers per hour, which was even faster than the British medium Mark A Whippet. However, this was only achievable on flat level road in a straight line. Off-road, the A7V was limited to 5 km per hour, or 3 miles per hour. The A7V was first deployed in March 1918, where they were used for the German Spring Offensive. The A7Vs, 5 squads of 3 tanks of which were deployed for the German attack on St. Quentin Canal, were initially very successful. The canal was captured and the German tanks successfully repelled a British counterattack, despite 2 A7Vs breaking down. On the 24th of April 1918, A7Vs were again deployed, this time to lead a German assault on the town of Villers-Bretonneux. Here, a squad of 3 A7Vs, leading an infantry attack, stumbled across 3 British tank Mark IVs. 2 of the British vehicles were armed with only machine guns, and so, being unable to damage the German tanks, withdrew. The 3rd Mark IV, however, was a Mark IV male, and so was armed with 2 6-pounder guns. This tank, commanded by 2nd Lieutenant Frank Mitchell, managed to destroy the leading A7V, commanded by Lieutenant Wilhelm Blitz, in what was the first tank duel in history. Mitchell's tank Mark IV, which was later joined by several Whippet mediums, went on to break up the German attack before being knocked out. The remaining A7Vs withdrew, although not before several had either broken down or toppled over into shell craters, a problem the A7V was especially vulnerable to due to its inherent top heaviness. These were later captured by the British and Australians, one of which was returned to Australia, where it can be seen today at the Anzac Museum in Brisbane, Queensland. As a result of this disastrous assault, the German High Command, who had never really been behind the A7V idea, ordered that all A7Vs be withdrawn from service. All A7Vs in German possession at the end of the First World War were scrapped. In all, the A7V was a somewhat less than successful design. Although it was well armoured and featured a formidable array of weaponry, it was very heavy, difficult to control, and had too many crew members to coordinate effectively, was prone to breaking down, and performed dismally off-road. This last issue was especially problematic in the very off-road conditions of the Western Front, where the A7Vs were prone to toppling into shell holes due to their top heaviness. In the end, only 20 A7Vs, including the prototypes, were built. This is a somewhat interesting number considering the fact that Germany deployed some 170 captured British tanks, or Beutepanzer, during the war, meaning that in the German army, captured tanks outnumbered domestic tanks by about 8 to 1. The Sturmpanzerwagen A7V project can be rightly considered a failure. However, from this failure, the Germans learned many lessons, which they would remember when they again began building tanks. The Treaty of Versailles called for, among other things, a huge reduction to the German army. Signed in 1919, this treaty limited the army to only 100,000 troops, and prohibited Germany from operating any armoured vehicles, including tanks, aside from a few armoured cars for security purposes. The German army was naturally rather bitter about the fact that their country had lost the war, was blamed for it, had to pay for damages, and was now forced to very severely limit its strength. However, Hans von Seeckt, who had been made Commander-in-Chief of the German Armed Forces in 1919, decided to form a secret committee to study the Great War, why Germany had lost, and how it could do better next time. And there would be a next time. This committee set about writing a new army doctrine, one that still had infantry at its core, but now relied a lot more heavily on the tank to spearhead offensives. The new doctrine focused on fast-moving formations intended to split up enemy army groups, using pincer movements and wedges to surround them and cut them off from the rest of their army, whereby it would be easier to destroy them. By 1926, the rewritten army doctrines were complete. Although the new doctrine featured the tank as a prominent component, Germany did not have much experience in building them. The slow, lumbering behemoths of the First World War would certainly not do, and because of the Treaty of Versailles, Germany could not experiment with new tank designs. Luckily for the Germans, the Soviet Union, who disliked and was disliked by the old Entente powers, namely Britain, France and the United States, offered to help Germany out. The Soviet Union was also developing a new tank force, and they were happy to collaborate with German officers and industrial designers in order to develop new tanks. The Germans also collaborated with Sweden, the damned neutrals. In 1926, in direct violation of the Treaty of Versailles, a prototype of Germany's first tank since the end of the First World War was built by Rheinmetall and Daimler-Benz. This was the Großtraktor, meaning large tractor, so called to mask its true purpose. This vehicle will be discussed in greater detail in the Neubaufahrzeug video. In 1928, Rheinmetall and Krupp produced a new pair of prototypes for testing at the super-secret Soviet testing facility in Kazan. This was the Leichttraktor, or light tractor, 3 prototypes of which were built with small differences, and these were tested at Kazan. Although the German army ordered 289 Leichttraktor's, this order was quickly cancelled, and only those 3 prototypes were built. These were used as training tanks during the war. In 1933, Hitler came to power. As one of his main campaign promises was to overthrow the Treaty of Versailles, he needed something to symbolize this, something big to embody how Germany was to be a big, strong, aggressive world power. So naturally, Hitler commissioned the development of a new heavy tank. That story, however, will also be discussed in the video of the Neubaufahrzeug. Hitler also focused on rearming and expanding Germany's military. Heinz Guderian, who was the Army Chief of Staff, had previously envisioned the creation of an armoured corps, which would utilise several different types of tank: an infantry or breakthrough tank, a main battle tank, and a light reconnaissance tank. In 1930, Krupp had developed a replacement for the unsatisfactory Leichttraktor. This vehicle was the Kleintraktor, or small tractor. This was armed with a 2 cm cannon, however the production version was equipped instead with two 7.92mm MG34 machine guns, due to shortages of the larger weapon. When Hitler came to power and set about forming a tank corps, the Kleintraktor was available to be put into production immediately. Although it was small and light, it was cheap, and many could be built in a short time to equip the Panzer Corps. This tank, designated Pz.Kpfw 1 Ausführung A, went into service in 1934. The Panzer I story, however, will also be continued in a later video. The German army was not stupid. It knew that the Panzer I was too small, too lightly armed, and too lightly armoured to be an effective fighting tank. Its twin machine guns were useful against infantry and soft targets such as trucks, and its armour would protect the crew from rifle-caliber bullets, but the tank was virtually defenceless against other tanks. This was made very apparent during the Spanish Civil War, when forces of the Spanish nationalists and the German Legion Condor encountered Spanish Republican tank forces, who were typically armed with the Soviet T-26 light tank, which, being armed with a 45mm anti-tank gun, hopelessly outclassed the little panzers. Germany had planned to eventually equip its tank forces with the Pz.Kpfw 3 battle tank and the Pz.Kpfw 4 support tank. However, these two tanks were taking a very long time to be developed, due to production delays and design issues that kept cropping up. Urgently needing a more capable tank than the Panzer I, the Waffenamt, or Military Ordnance Bureau, ordered the development of a stopgap tank armed with the 2 cm Rheinmetall KWK-30 L55 cannon, which was essentially a Flak 30 anti-aircraft gun modified to fit inside a tank. Krupp AG, Daimler-Benz, MAN, Herschel and Son AG all submitted design proposals as early as 1935, and the Waffenamt approved production of a hybrid tank using the Daimler-Benz hull mounted on the chassis designed by MAN, and featuring a turret that was essentially an enlarged version of that mounted on the Pz.Kpfw 1. The prototype Panzer II featured frontal armour thickness of 14mm, which, like on the Panzer I, would stop rifle bullets, but was still vulnerable to anti-tank guns. It did, however, feature a novel new construction technique, in that the armour plates were welded together rather than being riveted, as was the case with most tanks at the time. This made the tank lighter by omitting the increased weight of 500 or so rivets, and it also increased the armour's strength, rivets having a nasty tendency to burst when hit by even small arms fire. The early Panzer II also featured a suspension system consisting of 6 bogies, 3 on each side, each sporting a pair of road wheels. This system was derived from the Panzer I. The first series of prototypes of the Panzer II, namely the Ausf A/1, the Ausf A/2, and the Ausf A/3 were completed in early 1936. However, no Panzer IIs were deployed in the Spanish Civil War. They were first used in the large Wehrmacht training exercises in 1937, and were later used during the annexations of Austria and Czechoslovakia. Some pre-production Ausf A's were even used during the German invasion of Poland, and also France and Norway. They were retired to training roles by the end of 1940. 25 of each variant were built, for a total of 75 Ausf A's. The Pz.Kpfw 2 was issued with the SD-KFZ number 121, SD-KFZ being short for Sonderkraftfahrzeug, which means Special Purpose Vehicle. Each armoured tracked or half-track vehicle in service with the military of Nazi Germany was issued an SD-KFZ number. The SD-KFZ 101, for example, was the Pz.Kpfw 1. The SD-KFZ numbers were organised into 4 categories, with 1 to 99 referring to unarmoured half-tracks such as the SD-KFZ 2 Kettenkrad and the SD-KFZ 9 heavy half-track, 100 to 199 being allocated to tanks and vehicles built on tank chassis, such as the aforementioned Panzer II, being the SD-KFZ 121, the SD-KFZ 142 being the Stug 3, and the SD-KFZ 181 being the Tiger 1. Pz.Kpfw 200 to 299 was allocated to armoured cars such as the Pz.Kpfw 222 and the Pz.Kpfw 231, armoured personnel carriers such as the Pz.Kpfw 250 and 251, and to command tanks like the Pz.Kpfw 265 Panzer Each Pz.Kpfw vehicle could also be subcategorized into each variant designed for specific purposes. For example, the Pz.Kpfw 251/1 was the basic armoured personnel carrier, the Pz.Kpfw 251/2 carried an 8cm Granatwerfer 34 mortar, the Pz.Kpfw 251/9 sported a 7.5cm KWK 37 gun, turning the vehicle into an assault gun, and the Pz.Kpfw 251/17, which mounted a 2cm KWK 38 cannon, enabled this vehicle to be used as an anti-aircraft vehicle. Pz.Kpfw 300 to 399 was issued to specialised demolition vehicles, such as the Pz.Kpfw 303 Goliath remote-controlled mine. But that's enough about Pz.Kpfw numbers, fascinating though it is, and let's get back to the Panzer II. We talked about the pre-production Ausf A/1, 2 and 3, so now it's time to move on to the Pz.Kpfw 2 Ausf B. These are all lowercase a's and b's. German pre-production vehicles were issued lowercase Ausführung letters, and production vehicles received uppercase letters. Ausführung, by the way, means model, and Pz.Kpfw, as I'm sure you know, means armoured fighting vehicle. Now stop distracting me, goddammit. We've got a lot of Panzer II variants to get through. So, the Pz.Kpfw 2 Ausführung B differed from the Ausf A in that it featured slightly thicker armour, 16mm on the gun mantlet as opposed to 15mm on the Ausf A. This was because a decision was made to switch from nickel-plated armour plates to homogeneous steel plates, in order to reduce Germany's reliance on nickel, which was difficult to get hold of. The 1mm difference in thickness ensured that the steel plates had the same resistance to 7.92mm SMK steel-cored bullets, which Germany used to test its armour at the time, as nickel-plated armour had. This tiny increase of thickness to the tank's armour, however, somehow increased its weight by almost half a ton. Luckily, this did not significantly reduce performance. Small modifications were also made to the vision ports, engine deck and suspension system. Like the Ausf A's, the Ausf B was first used during the annexation of Austria and Czechoslovakia, and later during Poland, France and Norway campaigns, before being relegated to training duties at the end of 1940. 100 Ausf B's were built. The third pre-production variant of the Panzer II was of course the Ausf C. The main change this version introduced was the replacement of the Ausf A and B's Panzer I's derived suspension system with a new one comprised of 5 large road wheels on each side, independently sprung by a leaf spring on a crank arm. Although this increased the tank's weight by almost a full ton, the engine was also upgraded from the 130 horsepower Maybach HL57 TR 6-cylinder water-cooled petrol engine of the Ausf A and B to a new Maybach HL62 TR 6-cylinder water-cooled petrol engine, which delivered 140 horsepower. This 10 horsepower increase in power ensured that the Pz.Kpfw 2 Ausf C's performance was not affected by its increased weight. This variant was used alongside the earlier pre-production Panzer IIs and was retired at the same time. 75 Ausf C's were built. And now, finally, we get to the production Panzer IIs, starting with the Panzer II Ausf A. That's an uppercase A, by the way. The Ausf A made a few minor improvements over the pre-production Ausf C, such as the installation of a smoother gearbox, a minor rearrangement of the engine bay, usage of a less powerful electrical system to reduce interference with the tank's radio, the fitting of new vision ports, and the installation of a turret ring guard in front of and behind the turret on the hull roof. This last feature was designed to deflect shells that might hit the tank's vulnerable turret traverse system. Other than that, the Ausf A was left virtually unchanged from the pre-production Ausf C. 422 Ausf A's were built. The Pz.Kpfw II Ausf was produced to satisfy military orders for tanks, as the Panzer III program suffered further delays. The Panzer II B was essentially the same as the Ausf A, but there were a few minor improvements made. These included the addition of more bullet deflectors and the installation of 50mm thick bulletproof glass vision blocks behind the tank's vision slits to give the crew protection from shrapnel and enemy infantry specifically aiming for the vehicle's vision ports. The engine, transmission, armament and armour thickness all remained unchanged, and the Panzer II B mainly fought alongside the Panzer II A. A few, however, were sent to North Africa in early 1941, and these were fitted with additional armour and more stowage bins. 627 Panzer II Bs were built. And so we get to today's subject, the Pz.Kpfw II Ausf C. The 2C was developed due to the fact that the Panzer III still was not ready for production, and the factories needed something to do in the meantime. And so they did what tank factories do best, which was build tanks. The tank they built was, you guessed it, the Panzer II Ausf C. The 2C began production in June 1938, and was produced until April 1940. The Ausf C was essentially the same as the Ausf B, the only difference being a minor improvement to the vision ports. This essentially involved threading 2 more bolts through the 50mm thick bulletproof glass vision blocks to keep them in place if hit by a shell. The engine, armament and armour thickness of 16mm maximum were the same. The Panzer II Ausf C was first deployed in September 1939 during the invasion of Poland, where they were the Wehrmacht's main battle tank due to the still very limited number of Panzer IIIs then in service. By the time of the invasions of Norway, the Netherlands, Denmark, Belgium and France, sufficient numbers of Panzer IIIs and Panzer IVs were available for the Panzer II to be relegated to the role of reconnaissance tank. This was a good thing for the Germans, for the 2cm Kwk-30 cannon, with which the early Panzer IIs were equipped, was not all that effective as an anti-tank gun. Sure, it would effectively neutralise a Polish 7TP light tank or a British light tank Mark 6B, but when it came to battling something like a Hotchkiss H35 or a Renault R39, or, God forbid, a Matilda, something with a little more firepower was needed. During Germany's invasion of much of Western Europe, it was noted that the Panzer II's frontal armour thickness of 16mm, while mostly impervious to rifle and machine gun fire, was very vulnerable to pretty much every anti-tank gun, including the many anti-tank rifles that the Allies were armed with, most notably the Polish WZ-35 and the British Boys Mark I. Even though the Panzer II was now a reconnaissance vehicle, German commanders decided that the vehicle ought to have some resistance to anti-tank weapons, and so initiated a project to up-armour the current stock of Panzer IIs, namely the Ausf A, B and C. This essentially involved bolting additional armour to the front of the hull and the turret. The tank's sides and rear were left unchanged. This brought the frontal armour thickness of the Panzer II to a maximum of 35mm on the hull front, which, while increasing the tank's weight and thus reducing its speed and range, at least gave it some measure of resistance to anti-tank weaponry. The new and improved Panzer IIs were first deployed with the Deutsches Afrika Korps in North Africa. We in fact have an Afrika Korps Panzer II Ausf C here in War Thunder, which is nice. Panzer IIs deployed in North Africa were further modified with more ventilation slits, both for the crew and for the engine, to allow the vehicles to better cope with the very hot temperatures typical to the North African deserts. Also, they were fitted with more stowage bins and stowage racks. This enabled the Panzer II to carry as much water, fuel, spare parts and other provisions as was possible, which was necessary in that harsh environment. In North Africa, another problem was noted with the Panzer II. This was that if the tank was buttoned up, i.e. all the hatches were closed in order to protect the crew from, for example, an artillery barrage, an aerial attack, or from small arms fire, it was found that the commander could barely see out. The periscope he was provided with was inadequate, and as such, tactical awareness was compromised. Before Operation Barbarossa commenced in June 1941, therefore, most of Germany's current stock of Panzer IIs were retrofitted with the new type of commander's cupola, featuring a ring of periscopes, which had been developed for the Panzer II Ausf. Panzer II Ausf Cs, alongside Ausf As and Bs, were utilised as reconnaissance tanks during the German invasion of the Soviet Union. Most panzer regiments featured a platoon of Panzer IIs for this role, starting in late 1941 and continuing through 1942. The Panzerkampfwagen II Ausf A, B and C were gradually replaced with the new Panzerkampfwagen II Ausf F, and were relegated to internal security roles until the end of the war. The Panzerkampfwagen II was introduced as a stopgap measure to arm the German army until the Panzerkampfwagen III was ready in sufficient numbers. Despite this, it provided good service, first as a battle tank and later as a reconnaissance tank. However, it was never intended to keep the Panzer II in production once manufacture of the Panzer III was underway, and so beginning in 1942, Panzer IIs were phased out of the German army, remaining only as specialised reconnaissance vehicles or forming the basis for a few self-propelled guns and tank destroyer designs. As a battle tank, the Panzer II was fairly quick and a rather small target. However, its armour, even after the upgrade program, was never quite thick enough, and the 2cm cannon was really not an anti-tank gun, being better suited to dealing with infantry, soft targets and lightly armoured vehicles such as armoured cars and half-tracks. And here's where the story of the Panzerkampfwagen II Ausführung C comes to an end. The story, however, does continue with the Ausf D, E and F, all of which will be discussed in a future video. Now though, let's take a little look at the Panzerkampfwagen II Ausf C here in the wonderful world of War Thunder. So here we have the Panzerkampfwagen II Ausf C here in the wonderful world of War Thunder. Look at it there, isn't it lovely? Now, in War Thunder, the Panzer II C is a Rank 1 Battle Rating 1.0 light tank. It is armed with a 2cm Kw-30 cannon mounted in the turret, with 180 rounds of ammunition stored in 10-round box magazines. There is also a coaxial 7.92mm MG34 machine gun, which has 1,800 rounds of ammunition in 100-round belts. These are controlled by the commander, who sits in the turret. The turret features 360-degree horizontal traverse, taking approximately 35 seconds to complete a full rotation. The gun features 20 degrees of gun elevation and 9 degrees of gun depression, taking around 3 seconds to elevate from one extreme to the other. The gun can be unlocked from its elevation gear, however, allowing the commander to elevate it freely. This allows faster target acquisition when coming to a sudden stop. Ammunition choices for the Kw-30 are as follows. Default set with armor-piercing incendiary tracer shells and high-explosive fragmentation incendiary tracer shells in an API-T/HEFI-T configuration. Panzergranate set consisting entirely of armor-piercing incendiary tracer shells and the Pz.Kpfw 40 set consisting of high-velocity armour-piercing tracer shells. The first two sets give you 33mm of armour penetration at 100 meters, whereas the Pz.Kpfw 40 shells give you 63mm of penetrative capability at the same distance, so obviously you want to stock up on those rounds. The MG34 only gets default belts with armour-piercing incendiary rounds and armour-piercing tracer rounds in an AP-I/AP-I/AP-T configuration, and can perforate 12mm of armour at 100 meters. The Panzer II C has a crew of 3, the driver, the aforementioned commander, who also acts as the gunner, and the radio operator, who has to sit in the back, and also acts as the loader if the commander can't reach the next magazine. The tank is powered by a single Maybach HL62TR V6 liquid-cooled petrol, or gasoline for you American viewers, engine, which produces 140 horsepower or 103 kilowatts. This gives the vehicle a top speed of 43 km per hour or 27 miles per hour. This speed can be reached on level ground with enough of a run-up. Power runs from the rear-mounted engine through the fighting compartment via a drive shaft and into the forward-mounted transmission, which drives 2 frontally mounted drive sprockets. Said transmission consists of 6 forward gears and 1 reverse. Maximum reverse speed of the Panzer II is 8 km per hour or 5 miles per hour. The armour consists of 30mm on the turret front and 50mm on the sides and rear, as well as 10mm on the roof and a 30mm thick internal gun mantlet. Hull armour consists of 35mm on the front, albeit with a 30mm thick upper glacis, and 15mm on the sides, rear and roof. The frontal armour of the Panzer II C is impervious to heavy machine gun bullets and some cannon rounds at point-blank range, and at longer ranges will stand up to anti-tank shells. In the interior layout, at the very front is the transmission. While this does give a little more frontal protection, it also means that the tank can easily be immobilized if the lower glacis is perforated. Crammed in amongst the transmission is the driver, who sees the world through 3 vision blocks. A shot going through the driver's vision port will remove his cranium. Moving back, you can see a ready rack of 6 magazines for the KWK-30, each containing 10 shells. The tank carries 18 magazines in the ammunition racks for a total of 180 rounds. Above the ammunition stowage is the turret. The turret ring is protected by a 35mm thick armoured wedge on the front and a 15mm thick one on the back, although the sides are unprotected. While these wedges can be effective at deflecting shots aimed directly at the turret ring, any shot that perforates the turret is likely to damage the ring anyway, so these wedges are of dubious merit if you ask me. Right next to the turret rotation gear is the gun elevation gear. This is also protected by the wedge. The gun rotation and gun elevation gear are both manually operated. And above that is the tank's primary armament, the 2cm KWK-30 cannon. This thing gets damaged all the time, as does the coaxial MG34. There does not appear to be a gun sight, however, in my tests I have found that the gun sight is somewhere in between the two weapons. Can't see where though, and poking his head into the turret is the commander. He sees the world through those periscopes on the cupola and through these vision blocks. People tend to aim for the turret on the Panzer II, so expect your commander to be hit. To his right is the fuel tank. This, like in pretty much all German tanks, is full of good old flammable petrol. It is prone to catching fire, therefore. Tucked in at the back there is the radio operator, along with his radio. In War Thunder, this guy's job is essentially to climb into the turret when the commander is Tomato einst. And in the back there is the radiator on the left and the engine on the right. In the external view, you can see that this particular Panzer II C is an Operation Barbarossa example. You can tell this from the fact that it has a commander's cupola like that fitted on the Panzer II F, and from the fact that additional armour plates have been bolted onto the hull and turret front to bring them up to the 1941, 35 and 30mm standard. The suspension consists of 5 independently sprung road wheels on each side, each attached to a bell crank, to which is fixed a large leaf spring which bends against a peg fixed to the side of the hull. This provides the Panzer II with OK suspension, however the Germans weren't entirely happy with it. More on that in a future video. At the front is the rather large drive sprocket, and at the back is the adjustable idler wheel. There are 4 track return rollers. On the lower glacis plate is a section of spare track, which also acts as about 15mm of armour. This is held on by a bit of steel cable which appears to be the tank's only tow cable, which itself is looped around 2 towing hooks on the joint between the upper and lower glacis. On the upper glacis is a spare road wheel, which partially covers what is likely an access port for the transmission fluid filler cap. On the left side is what is likely the driver's hatch, although how he's supposed to use it without being an acrobat is something I'm sure Nicholas Moran will tell you. Bolted onto the upper glacis, as well as along the sides of the tank, are the tracked fenders. These, not being vital components, are made of mild steel. That diamond pattern on them is likely to provide better grip for people standing around on the tank, as Germans like to do. On the left of the driver's hatch is the horn. On each track fender is a headlight, although only the left fender features a hooded blackout light. On the right fender are stowed in metal clasps the bolt cutters and the all-important tank bar, or pry bar. On the left fender, behind the headlights, are the shovel and a long bracket to hold the radio antenna when in the stowed position. On the front of the superstructure, to which has been bolted about 20mm of extra armour, are 3 vision ports for the driver. They are hinged and so can be opened to give the driver a better view when not in combat. On the right side of the superstructure is a large stowage bin for keeping all your stuff and your junk. There is a slot cut out in the bottom for the fender bracket, however. On the roof of the superstructure are 4 hooks, which are used if the roof needs to be removed, for example when changing the transmission. There are also 2 round flaps, which may be fuel filler caps, as the fuel tank is pretty much directly underneath. And on the front and back are the aforementioned armoured wedges. The turret front features 15mm of bolted-on additional armour, and the gun mantlet has 2 splash guards, which are designed to deflect incoming fire away from the turret ring and the commander's cupola. The turret also features 2 ventilation flaps, one on the left and one on the right, as well as 2 vision slits, one on the right and one on the rear. There are also 3 hooks, which are used to lift the turret off with a crane. That armoured slot thing there is, I believe, a cover for a ventilation fan, but I could be wrong. If you know what that thing is, why not brag about it in the comments? On the top there we have the commander's cupola, featuring a hatch that opens to the right, and is surrounded by 8 periscopes and covered by an armoured disc. The turret roof also features 3 hooks so that it can be lifted off. On the back of the superstructure is a vision slit for the radio operator, so he at least has some idea of what is going on outside. The panel with a grate behind this vision slit is likely the radiator access panel, especially considering that the radiator is directly underneath it. However, I have seen a video that suggests that it is actually an access hatch for the radio operator, in which case the radiator should be further back. Perhaps that particular Panzer II, which was in a museum at the time, had its radiator removed. If you know anything about this, please say so down below. On the right side, the engine deck is raised and slopes downward at an 80-degree angle. This is to accommodate the engine. There is a large split hatch to allow access to the engine, however there are also 3 hooks which allow the whole deck to be removed, meaning that the entire engine can be replaced if necessary. At the very back there is another grille, likely for the manifold intake. On the left rear fender are 3 tools. The first are a couple of wooden blocks, which I would guess are used as chocks to prevent the tank from moving if, say, the tracks were removed for maintenance. That cylindrical thing is, I'm pretty sure, the fire extinguisher. Were the tank to catch fire, the radio operator, or perhaps a particularly helpful infantryman, can toddle up to the tank, unclip the extinguisher, and spray it onto any engine fires that may have occurred, much to the appreciation of the tank's crew. The large contraption next to it is, as I'm sure you've deduced, the jack. On the right fender are 2 jerrycans, likely containing fuel, as well as a large wooden toolbox. Funny thing about German jerrycans, it was so much better than the British fuel can, an example of which you can see on the British Sherman Mark II, and which tended to leak profusely, that the Allies took jerrycans from captured German vehicles whenever they could, and even began manufacturing them themselves when the Americans joined the war. On the back of the tank you have the exhaust pipe, featuring a large muffler complete with perforated shield to protect both it from damage and the hands of any German soldiers who felt so inclined to touch the scalding hot exhaust pipe. Just underneath the exhaust aperture is the standard German convoy light arrangement, and at the bottom there is the main tow hook. Overall, the Panzer II C is very well equipped. Not surprising considering it's a German tank, really. The 2cm Kpfw is effective against most targets you'll encounter, especially if you're using the Panzer 40 shells. Some of the more heavily armoured French tanks may pose some problems, especially vehicles like the Char B1 bis, but the Panzer II also has the speed and manoeuvrability to dance around these behemoths. The armour of the Panzer II C is pretty much average for reserve-level tanks, perhaps a little better. Let's compare it to its competition. At 35mm thick on the turret front and 30mm on the turret, the Panzer II C's armour is better than that of the American light tank M2A4, the British cruiser tank Mark III A13 Mark I, and the Japanese Hago and Aigo Co, and the hull armour is thicker than that of the Italian M13. The Soviet T-60 is roughly on par with the Panzer II armour-wise, and the French Hotchkiss H-35 only beats the Panzer II in terms of turret armour. Like I said before, don't rely on your armour to protect you, and there will always be something that can penetrate it. That being said, let's go over to the protection analysis thing to see how you'd kill a Panzer II. Data is taken from shots fired at a distance of 100 meters. With the light tank M2A4 firing M74 AP shot, fire into the driver's vision slit, killing the driver and radio operator. Avoid the upper glacis, side of the superstructure and turret ring protector, as your shot is liable to ricochet. I would also advise against shooting at the turret, for the M74 shot is likely to travel straight through and out the back without damaging anything. The M51 APCBC shot is a little more effective as it generates more shrapnel upon penetration, but only marginally. You might as well shoot the front of the superstructure. The same principle applies to the 40mm Shot Mark I shell, fired by the British 2-pounder gun, mounted on most early British tanks. Only those are a little more damaging due to their increased size over the American 37mm gun. I would also advise against shooting the Panzer II's lower glacis, for the round is likely to be absorbed by the transmission. This will immobilise the Panzer II, but it can still fire back at you. Most French tanks you'll encounter can only fire APCR rounds, which, while they can just about get through the Panzer II's armour at 100 metres, don't do much damage once through it. Aim for the driver's vision slit. With luck, you'll kill both him and the radio operator. If you're driving an H-35 or an FCM-36, the only part of a Panzer II you can perforate at 100 metres is the front of the turret. Therefore, try to kill the Panzer II's commander, and then try to make your way around to the side. Bear in mind, the Panzer II is much faster and more manoeuvrable than your French thing, and its cannon, while maybe not being able to perforate your frontal armour, can certainly go through your sides. In a Japanese Hargo or Igo-Ko firing APHE shells, there is no place in the front of a Panzer II you can perforate. Either switch to heat shells if you're in an Igo, or try to get around the sides. The three most effective reserve-level Panzer II killers are the Soviet T-26 and BT-5, and, oddly enough, the Italian M13. All these tanks fire APHE shells that can not only travel through the frontal armour of a Panzer II, they will also explode once doing so, doing extensive damage to the tank's interior. When you're the one driving the Panzer II C, here's how you deal with some commonly encountered enemy tanks. First, the American light tank M2A4. This is probably your most dangerous opponent, for not only does its speed and manoeuvrable rival that of you, its gun can easily penetrate any of your armour, and its own armour, while not particularly thick anywhere, is rather awkwardly shaped. Shoot it in the front of the superstructure. The LVT-A1, while not possessing much in the way of armour, is also literally a boat of a tank, and your shells will often get lost inside its cavernous interior. Its transmission is also quite spongy, and its gun mantlet is rather thick. Aim for the front of the superstructure. The Soviet T-26 is slow and cumbersome, and you can pretty much shoot it anywhere to kill it, but its gun is very dangerous. Use your speed to outmaneuver it, and avoid the upper and lower glacis as your shots will either ricochet or be absorbed by the transmission. The BT-5 is another one of your nemeses. It has the same gun as the T-26, but it is mounted in a vehicle that is much faster than your Panzer II. Its armour is also quite trollalicious, so aim for the turret or driver's hatch. Be aware that a BT-5, or its little brother, the BT-7, can and will appear unexpectedly at any time from any direction. The British A-13 Mark I and Tetrarch are mostly pushovers, for although they are fast in a straight line and their guns are quite potent, they are both rather unmanoeuvrable and their armour is made of papier-mâché. They can still kill you, however, and if driven by a competent driver, they are very dangerous indeed. Japanese tanks? Forget about them. They're slow and they can't really hurt you. And their armour is mostly bamboo. You'll have no trouble with Japanese tanks at this level. Likewise, the M13 from Italy is slow and poorly armoured. But unlike the Japanese, the M13 can actually hurt you, and its turret armour can stop a 20mm shell. The AB-41 armoured car is big and poorly armoured, but is also very quick, especially on hard flat terrain, and its cannon is not awful with the upgraded ammunition. With French tanks, just scoot around the side and plug it in the head. It can't turn to face you, and its gun will most likely not kill you, even if it can. Just be wary of the big boys, like the Char B1 Bis. And with all that in mind, I think it's time to see how the Pz.Kpfw C Ausführung C does in battle. Right, so here on the first battle in Poland or Eastern Europe or wherever it's set. And it doesn't really go that well. I see something in the bushes, I shoot at it, Turns out there's my phone. It's one of those American half-tracks. I'll shoot him a little bit, get a hit, that's about it. Because somebody else decides to come and attack me from the side any minute now. Damn, that's a durable half-track. So yeah, oh, there he is. Oh no, it's an M2A4. My nemesis. And here you can see the shock go straight through the front, killing both the commander and the loader. Oh, well done to him, anyway. Next one, we're in the desert. I'm in the desert, Panzer II. We're assaulting C with the bridge, and I think I can see something over there. So I'm going to take a few shots at him. And yep, there's a BT-5 over there. Hitting him from the side so the shots can go through. Reload. And oh, he's popping out again. And there we go. Through the side and into the commander. Now we're going to retreat because somebody probably has determined that we are here. So we're going to go over in this direction and flank round the side. Keeping an eye out. Because if there's one BT-5, then there's sure to be others. Taking a little look-see. Doesn't seem to be anything. Nothing on the side either. Oh, we're gonna make our way into the capture zone. Being on our tippy toes the whole time. Mind that bush. Looking through the bridge, seeing if there's any baddies. I think I hear something. Oh no! Oh, we've been ambushed! Can't see what it is. And he pulled back before we could get a shot at him. Luckily, his shot appeared to do only... well, it didn't do anything. It bounced off. So, we're gonna assault him with our little friend in the armoured car. It looks like a Tetrarch. Nope, it was another BT-5. Right, anything down there? Nope, doesn't appear to be. So we're gonna sit here capturing C, and that's what we've done. But oh no, our little friend in the armoured car has been killed, presumably by that A13. Yep, he got the drop on us. You can see just how deadly the 2-pounder is. So, not to be deterred, we're going to hop back into our Panzer II C not Africa Corps version. We're going to go hunt us an A13. Uh-oh. He's got a hit on us, but luckily it went into our transmission and didn't do any damage. Well, didn't do very much damage. So we're going to hop on over this rock and we're going to go get that A13 if he's still there. A little while later, we've hung around the capture zone, there's nothing here. But then all of a sudden... what the? It's a BT-7. He just sprang out of nowhere and didn't even see us. Unfortunately, my shots bounced off the side. Luckily, it doesn't manage to turn around by the time I reload. But then, oh no, his gunner was still alive and he puts it in our engine. So we finish him off and then put out the fire, presumably using that fire extinguisher on the rear fender. And then what is that? I can't really tell. I think it's a Tetrarch. He appears behind the bridge. Oh wait, no, looks like a French tank. And then a magical ice cream lorry appears. However, he can't do anything because he's armed with only 4 Maximum guns. And our little pally takes him out. So that's that for this battle. Next one, we're here in the Sinai Desert. In our Panzer II C, not the Africa Corps version. Gonna go scuttling around, seeing what we can see. What is that? Yep, there's another BT-5. Shoot him through the driver's hatch. And that is how you win the match. So we're going to scuttle around this rock and destroy all these fuel supplies that I'm sure would be very useful if we weren't in the middle of a battle. What's that? There's something over there. I can see it shooting. Can't see it where it is though. All that misty dust is in the way. Oh, there he is. Oh no. Oh, he hit our transmission. And then he hit us for reals. It's another A13. Yeah, they're easy enough to kill if you can hit them. If not, they can certainly kill you. So we load up our Panzer II Africa Corps version, and we're heading on up out of here with this. Gonna assault this hill. There's a Stuka buzzing over. It's all very dramatic. Oh no, it's an M2 medium. We hit a few of the fellows in it, but one of our dear comrades gets to him before we manage to reload. So we're going to continue up the hill, see what there is to see. Oh, yep, there's a Tetrarch. We knock him out easy enough. Oh, there's a whole bunch of them over there. Where's that, BT? No, there's a T-26. There was another one over there, but I can't see it. Well, he got taken out. Alright, having a little look. Doesn't appear to be anything else here. So we're going to move up and capture B. Oh no, we get flanked. By T-26 no less. Straight into the side. And that's that for this match. Right, here we are on the last battle, and as usual I've saved the best till last. We're on the Frozen Pass map, which I think is somewhere in Austria. And we're gonna go see what we can do here with our Panzer II. I've got the winter camouflage loaded, and as you can see I've glued some bushes to the outside of it, so we can blend in with the foliage. Which means that when the Russians are looking around, looking for any Germans, all they're going to see is some bushes. Uh-oh, that armoured car's dead. Oh, and that M13 is also dead now. So I'm thinking, well, this area looks a little dangerous. We're going to have to approach this tactically. Going to have to advance very cautiously, keeping an eye out for whatever's killing all my buddies. Looks like an A13, judging by what the kill score thing says. Right, so we're going to be very careful. We're going to look through these trees. We're going to wait to see what happens. That's the whole thing about... Oh, I think I see something through those bushes, but it turns out to just be nothing. But that's the thing. If you wanna be a survivor like me, you got to be patient. You got to be cautious. You can't just go gallivanting around that corner. Uh-oh, French tank. It looks like the ACMA-34, whatever it is. AMC-34, that's what it is. Right, so we're just gonna come over here and surprise him. He doesn't know we're here. And right through the driver's hatch. The MC-34 isn't particularly well armoured. It's a French cavalry tank, I think. Right, so Mr. M13. Gonna follow him and that Panzer III. And we're gonna advance upon the enemy. But yes, cautiousness and patience are worthwhile attributes. Because for every battle where you miss out on all the fighting because you've been too cautious, you'll get 2 or 3 battles where your cautiousness pays off. Take a glancing hit from something there. I think it hit the top of our engine deck. Yep, it's an M2A4. They're quite dangerous, so we're going to sit here while we reload the gun. And we're going to keep shooting at where it was that last point, because that gun can kill us in one. Right, under the cover of the smoke, we're going to move up a little bit more. He's over there somewhere. I'll do some probing with the machine gun, but I can't see him. Artillery comes in. There he is. Now we damage his gun, but he can still mark us with his machine gun. Oh no, wait, that's actually an M3. Well, luckily one of our shots go through and you can kill his gunner. Then some more of our shots go through into his turret ring and through his commander. And finally, we take him out. Over there's a BT5, well, was a BT5. Now we're just gonna sit here a little bit, listen. I don't think I can hear anything. There's something shooting over there, but I'm not really sure what it is, so I think we're gonna go take a look. Well, according to the minimap, it is an enemy, but I think he just got taken out because there's a big plume of smoke. Best go check it out anyway, just in case. Don't want to be flanked from behind. Nope, nothing here. Right, we're gonna continue our attack. Keep an eye out. What's he shooting at? We're not gonna drive out in the open, we're gonna go through the trees, where our camouflage will camouflage us. Oh, what? What did you say about German tanks? No, I'm just a harmless bush. Something? Yep, there's something around here. Look to your left, man. It's a Tetrarch. Oh, I'm gonna have to have a little standoff behind this bush. Rock, I mean. Luckily, we get the first shots off. I think he was panicking a little bit. Took too long to line up a shot, and there's an M2 medium over there. We punched some holes in him, but that thing's got like 6 crew members, so yeah, couldn't get all of them. And we're being shot at by something that I can't see. It wrecks the commander's optics, but nothing serious. Oh, he hits us again. I still can't see it. Oh, it's a crappy little French tank. I'm sorry, buddy. Straight through the front of the turret. I should have probably said that during the... Uh-oh. One moment. It's the M2, he's back. We get another crew member, but rest of our shots. Oh, and there's a Daimler armoured car as well. Right, we're just going to have to wait here. Hopefully they'll try poking. And hopefully I can trick them into thinking that I fired my gun by using my machine gun. Yeah, he's trying to get me to donk my shot. Yeah, I think he thinks I've fired now. Although he is firing artillery at us. So we're going to do the same to him. Oh, he's coming! And I fired my gun, but I had some more rounds in my magazine. He thought I was all empty. Sorry, Daimler, but not today. Although they have wrecked my stowage bin. Oh, there's another poor French tank here. Poor French tank. Gonna have to go put him out of his misery. If I can hit the damn thing. The turret on the AMC is a little bit tougher than that on the Hotchkiss because it's not as flat. So we're going to have to shoot him in the hull. And what is that over there? Is that a flak truck? Some sort of anti-aircraft vehicle. Oh no! It's a light tank Mark 6B. Well, it was a Mark 6B. Well, these are all fairly, fairly easy to kill vehicles we've encountered so far. So we're going to advance behind these trees, and finally we get some proper damage done to us. Caught out in the open, hit from the side by something. He kills our radio operator and jams the turret ring, so we're going to have to go and hide somewhere and repair it. This looks like as good a place as any. Park ourselves up between these trees and start repairing the turret. You can hear it trying to turn around, but it's completely jammed. At some point we're going to have to go get another crew member as well, because the commander's looking pretty hurt. And one more crew member taken out would mean the death of the tank. Right, everything seems in working order. I think we're going to go forwards here. They won't expect us to do this. Driving up through the trees and over the top. Doesn't seem to be anything up here, so well, we're going to keep going. What is that? Oh, there's a tank. It was an an A13. And just clear out the rest of the magazine. But unfortunately, you can't reload a partially emptied one. You have to empty the whole thing before you can reload it. Which is a bit annoying, but I'd rather have a full magazine than 3 extra shots. Shoot that M2 in the side. He'd already had most of his crew killed, and shoot that whatever it was in the back. Now we're gonna take up an overwatch position on the capture point. Gonna make sure nobody comes and surprises the people who are gonna capture it. Quickly drive through the capture circle. But for some reason I decide that it's wise to not sit in it. So we're going to park up here. Just decidedly not in the capture circle. And unfortunately I get it into my head that this is the greatest spot ever, and I shan't move from it for a very long time. So while Mr. M13 captures the point, we're going to protect him from the flanks. Here's something coming. Might just be the M13. Oh, bombs incoming. Well, they'll be targeting the capture point. And I think we're out of the blast radius. Yep, we were. It rocks the tank a little bit, but that's about it. It's knocked down all those trees over there, so it should be more difficult for the enemy to approach without being spotted. I think I'm getting paranoid at this point because I've survived for so long. I'm thinking, oh, maybe I'll get through the whole thing. Yeah, we're being strafed by something now. And I hear shots coming from over there, so we're going to take a look. And he's just behind the rock. We can't see him, which is very annoying. We're just going to wait and see if he drives forward a little bit. There's no sense in breaking from cover just to get another kill. But then I see on the minimap someone appears from the side, and oh no, he's got a perfect flanking shot. Luckily the funny little Italian tank takes him out, and then we get strafed by an aeroplane. Luckily he's firing rifle caliber machine gun bullets, and so they don't manage to pierce the roof armour. If you're gonna strafe ground targets in your crappy little biplane, at least shoot at an anti-aircraft truck or an open-top tank destroyer. Because shooting at a tank won't really do anything. Unless, of course, it's particularly under-armoured. Well, another tank's appeared from the side. I figure instead of turning the whole tank, which might draw attention to us, we're just going to turn the turret. Artillery opens up. But, again, my tardiness bites me in the bottom, because our friend takes out the LVT-3P. Just gonna keep the turret pointing in that direction for a little while longer, just in case anyone else shows up. Then I figure, right, our boys in the capture zone are being shot at. I think it's best we go and help them. And oh no, there's an M2A4. Yeah, I'll turn this turret round. And yeah, we get him. We have saved the day again. Although quite honestly, we kind of just stole that kill. Right, we've captured the point, and we've won the battle. 12 kills. How about that, eh? Alright. Let's see all the money and jewellery we won from that. It is, of course, a reserve battle. Ah, yes. Not very much at all. Lovely. And so there you have it. The Pz.Kpfw Ausf C. Should probably have learned how to pronounce the German C, but there you go. It's a jolly good little tank, and an excellent choice for a beginner to War Thunder, I think. And even for experienced players like me, it could still bring a little bit of fun to the low tier battles. So, yeah, sorry about the very, very, very long delay it took getting this video out, but a lot of stuff's been going on and all that jazz. So hopefully you enjoyed the video, and thank you very much for watching, and hopefully you'll join us for the next one, where we'll be taking a little look at everyone's favourite Russian biplane, the Pz.Kpfw I-15. I think we'll be doing the first 3 or 4 versions of it. So, hopefully you'll join me then. But until then, thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.